Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. It was the first week of June 2013 when my brother Wes and I drove down the long, winding road into Mayersville, Mississippi, a town so small you could blink and miss it entirely. The sun was just beginning to dip into the tree line, bleeding a sickly orange across the sky. A swarm of cicadas buzzed like static around us, their chorus only broken by the crunch of our tires against gravel. We were heading to Uncle Matt's place, a weather-beaten 2-story house nestled just a couple miles off the Mississippi River. The kind of place that looked like it could survive a tornado and a flood at the same time. Mostly because it probably already had. Wes had just turned 21 last month, and we'd promised each other we'd spend the summer doing something memorable. Uncle Matt's invitation couldn't have come at a better time. He said we needed, boss, some man time away from the static of city life. At the time, it sounded like an offer for peace and quiet. It turned out to be anything but. Uncle Matt greeted us with his trademark bear hugs, bone-crushing, full of warmth, but laced with the kind of strength that made you wonder if he could tear a tree out by its roots. He hadn't changed much, still built like a linebacker, his salt and pepper beard bristling like steel wool, and that wild gleam in his eyes that said he'd seen things most men wouldn't talk about. The house smelled of cedar wood, sweat, and something faintly metallic. I told myself it was the well water. We unpacked and cracked open a couple beers. Wes was legally allowed now, but we both knew he'd had more experience with drinking than his ID let on. We sat on the back porch, the three of us, talking nonsense, stupid stuff about college, girls, and Wes's new tattoo that he swore wasn't infected. Uncle Matt had an old pool table in the garage, and soon enough, we were deep into a game, the air thick with laughter and cigarette smoke. That night, after a greasy dinner of fried catfish and too many beers, Uncle Matt pulled out a weathered map of the surrounding area. It was covered in coffee stains, burn marks, and strange little X's marked in red ink. "You boys ever been camping along the Mississippi?" he asked, eyes narrowing like he already knew the answer. "Not since we were kids," Wes replied. "Why?" "There's a good spot. Quiet, private. You'll like it. Just past Miller's Creek. We'll leave in the morning." Something in his voice made the hairs on my arms rise, but I brushed it off. As we cleaned up the table and prepared for bed, Uncle Matt leaned back in his creaky recliner and cracked open a new beer. "Just one thing," he said, his tone dropping into something darker. "Y'all should know that River's seen things. Old things. You ever hear of the Mayersville Thing?" Wes chuckled. "Is that like the Jersey Devil or Bigfoot?" Uncle Matt didn't laugh. "This ain't no campfire story, boy." He paused for a long moment. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees moaned. "When I was your age," he continued slowly, "I went fishing out by Dead Man's Hollow. I hooked a walleye big enough to break your wrist. As I reeled it in, something tried to take it from me. Thought it was a bull shark at first, but what I saw, it wasn't no fish I've ever known." "What was it?" I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. "Something standing on 2 legs, tall, 7, maybe 8 feet, skin like rotted scales, eyes that glowed, and teeth." He shuddered. "Teeth like obsidian." Wes laughed nervously. "Come on, man." Uncle Matt didn't blink. It looked at me like it knew what I was, like it had seen people before, and it wanted more than just fish. A long silence followed. The wind outside howled louder now, like something angry was clawing at the edges of the house. Uncle Matt finally stood up and tossed the empty beer can into the sink with a clatter. get some rest. Big day tomorrow." Wes rolled his eyes when our uncle left the room. "He's just messing with us." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the image from my head. Something that looked at you like it had seen people before. What the hell did that mean? That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing faint splashes in the distance, like something heavy was dragging itself through water. The moonlight spilled through the window in odd, crooked beams, casting shadows that didn't seem to match the furniture. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps outside. Not the quick shuffle of a raccoon or the clumsy stumble of a deer, but slow, deliberate footsteps. I sat up in bed, heart racing. But when I checked the yard through the cracked window, there was nothing there. Just the woods and the river, ever so faint in the distance, shining like black glass under the moon. Morning came far too quickly. The sky was gray and heavy, and the birds were oddly silent. We loaded up the truck, tents, cooler, bait, Uncle Matt's M14 rifle, and headed for the campsite. As we drove, the road narrowed, the trees grew thicker, and the air heavier. I noticed dead birds along the roadside, more than usual. One with its eyes missing, another twisted unnaturally like it had been crushed mid-flight. "Storm must have passed through here," Wes said, though the forecast had been clear. Uncle Matt didn't say a word. His hands gripped the wheel tighter, and his eyes kept darting toward the tree line. As we pulled into the dirt clearing that would be our home for the next 2 nights, I caught a glimpse of the river again. The water looked wrong. It didn't ripple. It pulsed, like something beneath the surface was breathing. The clearing we parked in was a hollowed-out patch of land maybe 30 yards from the river. Towering cypress trees loomed overhead, their trunks bloated and slick with moss. Spanish moss hung like shredded curtains, twitching in the windless air. The Mississippi sat still and wide, the surface so glassy it reflected our truck perfectly, like a dark mirror. We got to work unloading gear. Uncle Matt took charge, laying out our tents, fishing poles, food coolers, and of course, his rifle case. Wes was in good spirits, joking as he carried bundles of firewood over one shoulder. "See? Not a monster in sight," he grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. I didn't laugh. Something felt off. The air was thick, not just with humidity, but with a strange pressure, like the atmosphere before a tornado, charged and heavy with something you couldn't name. We hiked down a short trail to the sandy edge of the river, its banks covered in driftwood and old beer cans. I noticed a few odd depressions in the mud. They were too large for raccoons, too wide for deer. I crouched to take a closer look. 3 long impressions, not quite paw prints, not quite footprints either. "Some big-ass cat, maybe?" I mumbled aloud. "No cats around here," Uncle Matt said behind me, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe a gator, or maybe not." He didn't elaborate, just slung the rifle case over his shoulder and turned back toward camp. As dusk settled in, we got the fire started. Wes and I managed to hook 2 decent-sized walleyes after an hour of fishing, and the air smelled of salt, wood smoke, and lemon seasoning. Wes tended to the potatoes, turning them in foil as the fish crackled in the skillet. Uncle Matt sipped on a beer, reading a hardcover copy of IT, the firelight dancing on the glossy cover like it was alive. That's when we heard it, a sharp splash near the shallow bend in the river, not far from our setup. "The hell was that?" I said, standing. "Probably just a catfish." Wes shrugged without looking up. Another splash, this one louder, closer, then silence. "Hope that ain't a gator," Uncle Matt muttered, putting his book down and squinting toward the water. "No way," Wes said, but his voice lacked confidence now. The woods behind us had gone completely quiet. No cicadas, no frogs, just the soft crackle of our fire and the slow churn of water lapping at the riverbank. We ate in silence, half listening for more movement. Uncle Matt flipped the safety on his rifle and kept it leaning against the log next to him. I could tell he wasn't taking chances. After dinner, I sent a few pictures of our catch to my girlfriend back home, tossing my phone into my bag afterward. Wes wandered off to take a leak in the bushes, his flashlight bobbing with each step. "Hope there ain't no snake in them bushes," Uncle Matt called after him. "Funny," Wes shouted back, his voice already muffled by the distance. I was sweating from the heat. The fire didn't help, and the air was heavy with the scent of wet leaves and river muck. Without a word, I stood up, peeled off my white tank top, and walked to the river's edge in just my bathing suit. I needed to cool down. The water felt cold but good. I waded in slowly, letting the mud squish between my toes. Then I dove in, plunging into the inky blackness, my ears filled with the muffled echo of the underwater world, a dark silence that swallowed sound like a sponge. I surfaced, wiped the water from my face, and dove under again. That's when it grabbed me. Something closed around my left calf like a vice, cold, rough, strong. I flailed, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. I opened my eyes underwater and saw something. Not a fish, not a gator, not human. It was a humanoid figure, just visible in the blurry darkness. Its arm was long and scaly, its hand wrapped around my leg with inhuman fingers ending in claws. Black spikes jutted from its back like broken glass. Its skin shimmered in the water like oil on asphalt. I kicked, hard, again and again. I connected with something, maybe its face, and the grip loosened. I shot out of the water, screaming loud enough to wake the dead. Wes came running, pants half-zipped. Uncle Matt was already up, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the river. "There's something in the water," I yelled, collapsing on the sand. My leg throbbed with pain. They gathered around me as Uncle Matt grabbed the first aid kit. He unwrapped my leg, revealing 3 long, deep cuts down my calf. Not bleeding much, but red and raw, like the thing had raked me with razor blades. "What the hell happened?" Wes asked, pale. "It wasn't a gator," I panted. "It was something else. Some kind of fish thing with arms." Uncle Matt's face drained of color. He said nothing as he poured antiseptic on the wounds and wrapped them tight. His hands trembled slightly. That scared me more than anything. "You get a look at it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Sort of. It was man-sized, bigger, spikes on its back, eyes like... I don't know." "Shit," Wes muttered. "It's the damn monster. You weren't making it up?" "Oh, now you believe me?" I snapped, pain flaring in my leg. Wes pointed at my bandaged calf. "What kind of fish makes cuts like that?" Then Uncle Matt went stiff. He was staring at the river, not the surface, beneath it. I followed his gaze and saw them. 2 glowing orbs, yellow-green, lidless, watching us from the shallows. Eyes without irises or pupils, shining like headlights in the dark. "What the fuck is that?" Wes whispered, sweat trickling down his temple. Uncle Matt didn't answer. He ran to the tent, yanked open the rifle case, and returned with the M14. Without hesitation, he raised it and fired 4 deafening rounds into the water. The muzzle flashes lit up the clearing like lightning. When the water settled, the eyes were gone. "Looks like it left," Uncle Matt said, lowering the rifle. "For now." "What if it comes back?" I asked. "We've got weapons," he said grimly. "If it returns, we shoot. If it can't come on land, we're safe. Right?" Wes said, his voice cracking. We didn't answer. We just sat there, staring at the water, listening to the silence that followed. We should have left, but we didn't. We wanted to believe we were tough. We wanted to believe it couldn't get worse. We were wrong. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows across the campsite. The uneaten potatoes sat in the ashes, blackened and forgotten. None of us said a word for what felt like an eternity. Wes sat cross-legged near the tents, still holding a machete he hadn't realized he'd grabbed. Uncle Matt stood at the edge of the tree line, eyes fixed on the river with the M14 clutched in both hands, his knuckles white. I lay back against a cooler, my bandaged leg elevated and throbbing with every heartbeat. The pain was manageable. The fear wasn't. "What time is it?" I asked. Wes checked his phone. Almost midnight. "You think it's still out there?" Uncle Matt answered without turning around. "I don't think it ever left." The air felt colder now, not because of the wind. There wasn't any. The trees stood unnaturally still, their leaves unmoving like someone had hit the pause on the world. The insects had gone quiet again. No buzzing, no chirping, no croaking frogs. Just silence and the occasional hiss of sap cracking in the firewood. We should have packed up. We should have left. But for some reason, maybe pride, maybe stupidity, we stayed. Told ourselves we'd keep watch in shifts, made some half-assed plan about surviving the night and heading back at dawn. We were idiots. Uncle Matt took the first shift. Wes and I tried to sleep. I laid down with the AR-15 within reach, heart pounding too fast to let me drift off. I couldn't stop seeing those glowing eyes in the water, those lidless orbs burning out and into my memory like acid on film. When Matt tapped my shoulder an hour later, I knew sleep had never come. My turn. He handed me the AR-15 and gave me a quiet nod before disappearing into his tent. Wes was already snoring, a deep, rasping sound that grated against the silence. I sat on a folding chair facing the river, trying to keep my eyes open. After 20 minutes, boredom got the better of me. I pulled out my phone and started playing Angry Birds, the familiar theme song feeling painfully out of place here in the dark woods beside a haunted river. That's when I heard it. A hiss. Low, wet, guttural. It came from behind me. Not the river, but the bushes where Wes had gone to pee earlier. I froze, the phone slipping out of my hand and landing in the dirt. I waited. Then came a growl, but not from any animal I'd ever heard. It was layered, almost like two voices overlapping. A gravelly, phlegmy snarl, and beneath it, a higher clicking sound like chattering teeth or crunching bones. I stood up slowly, raising the AR-15 and switching on the underbarrel flashlight. I flipped the night vision scope into place, heart hammering so loud I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. The flashlight beam swept across the bush. Nothing. Then I stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and the light caught something, a shape. It rose out of the underbrush like a nightmare emerging from sleep, gray, mottled skin glistening in the beam. It was crouched low, one clawed hand digging into the dirt, the other braced against a tree. Webbing stretched between its fingers. Its forearms had fin-like ridges running down their length, and its legs bent backward like a frog's, ending in 3 webbed toes tipped with hooked claws. Its back was lined with jagged black spines, each one twitching slightly, like the quills of a porcupine. A thick, sinuous tail slithered behind it, ending in a flat, paddle-like tip covered in scars and slime. Its chest expanded and contracted with a wet-sucking noise, like it was breathing through waterlogged lungs. And then I saw its face, elongated, bony, a jaw filled with needle teeth. No lips, just a gaping maw that dripped with slime and blood. Its eyes were enormous and yellow, slit down the middle like a snake's. But the left eye? The left was milky and blind, a long scar cutting through it diagonally. Below that eye, a gash ran down its cheek, pink and raw, like it had been sliced by a blade long ago. It hissed again and opened its mouth wide, revealing a dark cavern of writhing flesh and more teeth than should be possible. I didn't think. I just screamed and pulled the trigger. The AR-15 barked in my hands, each shot lighting up the clearing like strobe lights at a rave. The recoil slammed against my shoulder again and again as I emptied nearly the whole magazine into the creature's chest. It shrieked, an ear-piercing, guttural wail of pain and fury, and lunged sideways, moving on all fours with horrifying speed. It darted around me, brushing past my leg as it tore through the underbrush and leapt into the river with a tremendous splash. I stood frozen, fingers still on the trigger, smoke curling from the muzzle. Then Wes and Uncle Matt were there, machetes in hand, eyes wide and mouths open. "You okay?" Matt yelled, grabbing my shoulders. Yeah, I think I hit it. It ran back into the river." "Jesus Christ," Wes whispered. "You saw it? Up close?" I nodded, my voice was gone. "Did it say anything?" Matt asked quietly. "What? I mean, did it speak? Did it try to communicate?" "No," I said, though I hesitated. But it looked at me, like it knew what I was, like it recognized me. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We packed the essentials, rifles, machetes, first aid kit, and bolted for the truck as the sky turned a sickly pre-dawn blue. The forest seemed to close in behind us as we left, branches reaching like fingers. We left the tents, the coolers, the food. We didn't care. We just wanted to get out alive. Uncle Matt called the cops from the truck. He kept his voice steady, told them there was an incident at the Millers Creek campsite. He didn't elaborate. Wes and I sat in the back, silent, sharing a beer in the rising light of day. It tasted like rust and ash. "What the hell was that thing?" Wes whispered after a long time. "I don't know," I said, "but it bleeds." Even after we left the campsite in the gray morning light, the panic hadn't worn off. The truck stank of sweat, gunpowder, and fear. We didn't speak during the drive back, and when Uncle Matt finally parked in his driveway, it felt like we'd just escaped a war zone. But the night wasn't done with us yet. We slept through most of the day, dead to the world. When I finally woke, the shadows outside were already long again, stretching like claws across the yard. My legs still ached from the gashes, and the bandages were soaked with a faint blue-green stain. I didn't remember the blood being that color last night. I didn't say anything. Wes came out of his room, rubbing his eyes and holding his stomach. "I feel sick," he mumbled. Uncle Matt, pacing in the kitchen with a beer already open, didn't look much better. His eyes were sunken. He hadn't shaved. There was a stiffness in his body I hadn't seen before, like he was holding something back, like he was afraid if he relaxed even for a second, the walls would come crashing down. "You think it followed us?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just stared out the window, toward the tree line. That night, we decided, again, to go back. Not to camp, just to retrieve our stuff. Wes argued against it, but Matt insisted. We left weapons, gear. If it's gone, we get in and out. What we didn't know is it wasn't gone. We arrived at the campsite just after 10 p.m. The police were already there, 2 cruisers, no sirens, just headlights casting long beams into the trees. Yellow tape cordoned off the area, fluttering in the windless dark. Our tents were still up, weirdly pristine. Everything else was trashed. The coolers had been shredded like paper. Deep claw marks, 4-pronged, about a foot long, ripped through plastic and foam like nothing. All the food was gone. The ground was soaked, not with water, but something thick and congealed. A trail of it led back to the riverbank. Blue blood. It shimmered under the flashlight, like liquid sapphire. The sheriff stood nearby, arms crossed, face pale. "You the ones that called this in?" he asked. Uncle Matt nodded. The sheriff exhaled through his nose, then motioned to an officer who handed him a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a wad of moss and dirt, and a long sliver of grayish skin, thin as a leaf, but flexible like rubber. "We found this by the bushes, where you said it attacked." Matt took one look and muttered under his breath. "Still alive?" The sheriff looked us over. "You boys been drinking?" "Yeah," Wes said, "but that's not what this is." "I wouldn't believe a damn word," the sheriff said, "if it weren't for this." He pulled a second bag from his coat. Inside was a blood-stained cloth, from my leg bandage, glowing faintly blue. "I've been on the force 38 years, he said. "I've never seen anything bleed like this. Ain't gator, ain't bear, and sure as hell ain't human." We started packing up what little was salvageable, but something inside me itched, that same pressure in the air I felt the night before. The sense that something was watching. And then I remembered the growl from the bushes. It hadn't just sounded wrong. It had sounded intelligent. We should have left right then, but we didn't. Later that night, back at the house, Wes and I stayed up while Matt cleaned his guns. We drank quietly in the den, trying to numb the tension like it was a wound we could bandage with beer. I kept the AR-15 within reach, just in case. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees swayed in slow, syrupy movements, and somewhere far off, a branch cracked. Loud. Too loud. Uncle Matt stood up. Back door. Something moved. I aimed my flashlight through the window. Bushes rustled, then stopped. I flicked the night vision scope down over one eye and switched it on. Nothing. Then, I panned left and froze. Something was standing near the edge of the tree line, still as a statue. Not crouching this time. Standing fully upright, easily 8 feet tall, covered in slick, dark skin that shimmered like wet stone. Its arms hung low, nearly to its knees, claws gleaming. The webbing between its limbs fluttered slightly in the wind. Its eyes locked on mine through the scope, bright yellow. But this time there were pupils, slits like razors, and they dilated. It saw me. It knew I saw it. My stomach turned ice cold. I lowered the scope, heart stuttering. "It's out there," I said. "It's watching the house." Matt grabbed the rifle. Wes backed against the wall, clutching a machete. We waited. For 10 minutes, nothing. Then, thump, on the side of the house. Then again, thump, thump. It was testing us. I turned the flashlight toward the window again, just in time to catch a flash of gray moving past. Something leapt, shadow to shadow, with impossible speed. Then, crack! Glass shattered. Something had slammed into the back window of the kitchen. We all turned, and that's when it stepped into the open. It stood in the moonlight, fully exposed. Its body was lean but powerful, like a swimmer's, covered in overlapping scales that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Its chest heaved as it hissed, long gills flaring along its neck. Its mouth split wide into a serpentine grin, teeth jutting in every direction. But its eyes, one was blind, scarred, and milky. The other was fixed on me. Recognition, like it remembered me. I raised the AR-15 and fired without hesitation. The bullets slammed into its chest and shoulder. It screeched, twisting in pain. But it didn't fall. It charged. I fell backward as it crashed into the side of the house and vanished into the dark again. Screams filled the night. Mine, Wes's, even Matt's as we scrambled to secure the doors. Silence returned, but not peace. Uncle Matt's hands trembled as he locked the last bolt on the back door. "We're leaving tomorrow," he said. "We pack, we drive, we don't stop." No one argued, but none of us slept that night. And we all knew something terrifying. It wasn't hunting at random, it remembered, and it was coming back. We left just after 4 a.m. There was no debate, no packing of extra clothes or gear. We grabbed weapons, phones, wallets. That was it. The night still hung thick in the air, a velvet black blanket pressed down over Mayersville, the trees standing deathly still as if holding their breath. Even the crickets were silent. Uncle Matt loaded his M14 with cold precision, barely blinking as he shoved the magazine home. I had the AR-15 across my lap, finger tight on the trigger. Wes held one of the machetes in his lap, like it was a crucifix. No one said it aloud, but we were all thinking the same thing. It knows where we live. The truck engine roared to life. As Matt backed out of the driveway, the headlights swept across the tree line. For a moment, I thought I saw a shape. Something tall. Something watching. I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes forward. We sped through the back roads of Mayersville, passing rusted mailboxes and abandoned shacks that hadn't seen life in decades. The mist rising from the ditches clung to the tires, wrapping the truck in a ghostly fog that felt unnatural. Like the river had followed us, slinking in from the woods, leaking into the land. At one point, something thudded on the roof. Just once. A dull, wet thump. Wes screamed and nearly dropped the machete. Uncle Matt swerved instinctively, nearly clipping a guardrail. "What the fuck was that?" Wes shouted. I aimed the flashlight up through the windshield. Nothing. No branches, no debris. "No bird makes that kind of noise," I muttered. We didn't stop. We didn't dare stop. By the time we reached the Mayersville Sheriff's Office, the sky had begun to pale with the sickly yellow of false dawn. The building was small, a squat, one-story brick block with a flickering porch light and an American flag that barely moved in the morning breeze. Matt pulled into the lot, tires screeching. We burst through the front door like lunatics. A young deputy at the desk looked up, startled, coffee halfway to his lips. "Whoa, whoa, slow down." Uncle Matt didn't slow down. "Where's Sheriff Dixon?" he barked. "He's in the back." "Sir, is that a—" Matt shoved past the desk, rifle slung over his back. I followed, dragging Wes with me. The deputy fumbled for his radio. We found Sheriff Dixon in his office, still nursing what looked like his first cup of the morning. He raised an eyebrow as we stormed in. "You boys look like hell," he said calmly. "What happened?" Matt slammed the rifle onto the desk. We saw it again. The sheriff didn't blink. "The thing from the river?" Wes nodded. "It followed us. It came to the house." I pulled out my phone, scrolling frantically through the photos. One from the day before everything went to hell, showed the cooler we'd left behind. I flipped to the next, a claw mark burned into plastic. The next, the wound on my leg, fresh, bleeding blue. The next, blurry but unmistakable, glowing yellow eyes caught in the night vision scope. The sheriff leaned forward, expression unreadable. "You're telling me this thing came after you at your own house?" "Yes," I said. "It knows who we are." Dixon sat back in his chair, sighing. "I didn't want to believe it," he muttered. "Been hearing stories for decades. Fishermen seeing things. Kids going missing near the banks. Hell, even old man Dyer swore he saw a river devil back in '82. But no one ever had proof." He opened a drawer, pulling out a folder marked "Closed Cases." He dropped it on the desk. Dozens of reports spilled out. Missing persons, shredded boats, unexplained injuries. "Officially, these were accidents," he said. Unofficially, I've been waiting for someone to survive long enough to say something different. Why didn't you say anything? Matt growled. Because this town depends on that river. Fishing, tourism, boat charters. You start telling folks there's something alive down there that can hunt a man like a deer. You kill Mayersville dead. People have died, I said, voice shaking. Kids. Dixon looked me straight in the eyes. You think I don't know that? There was a long silence, then Wes finally broke it. So what now? Dixon leaned back, thinking. I'm going to send a few cruisers out there, retrieve what's left, collect evidence, but this doesn't go public. Not unless you want the National Guard turning Mayersville into a war zone, or worse, some government agency swooping in and sweeping this all under the rug. He opened another drawer and pulled out a checkbook. Y'all shut your mouths about this, and I'll make it worth your while. Uncle Matt looked ready to punch him, but then his eyes drifted to the bandage on my leg. His face softened. He took a deep breath and nodded once. Fine. The sheriff scribbled out a number and tore the check free. He slid it across the desk. I won't say how much was written there, but it was enough. We left the station as the sun broke over the treetops, casting long shadows across the lot. Sheriff Dixon's deputies had already started loading into their cruisers, heading toward the old campsite with evidence bags and rifles. We didn't go with them. We never went back. We didn't sleep that morning. Even after leaving the sheriff's office and returning to Uncle Matt's house, the idea of closing our eyes felt impossible. The daylight didn't make us feel any safer. It only made the shadows easier to see. I sat on the porch, leg elevated, watching the leaves stir ever so slightly in the breeze. Each movement out of the corner of my eye made my body jolt, with a fresh surge of adrenaline. Wes sat beside me, silent, sipping on a beer even though it wasn't even noon. None of us said what we were all thinking. It wasn't over. It wouldn't be over just because we left. At around 1 p.m., Matt's phone buzzed. It was the sheriff. They found something. We didn't want to go back, but we had to. Curiosity has a way of dragging you toward the edge of the cliff, even when you know something awful is waiting below. The ride back to the campsite was quiet. The forest seemed darker than before. Sunlight barely filtered through the thick canopy, casting everything in a permanent twilight. The Mississippi River, usually muddy brown, looked almost black now, like tar. The police had already taped off the site. 3 cruisers were parked around the perimeter. Deputies moved quietly, some taking photos, others whispering to one another as they handled thick evidence bags with blue gloves. Sheriff Dixon met us by the main trail, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the trees more than our faces. We didn't touch anything until you got here, he said, but you're gonna want to see this. He led us past the destroyed coolers, still covered in claw marks. The ground around them was wet and muddy, smeared with streaks of dark blue. The blood had dried in places, but in the shade it still shimmered like oil on water. That alone would have been enough to terrify anyone. But then the sheriff knelt down by the water's edge and pointed to something. Half buried in the mud was a footprint, or rather, something close to one. It was massive, at least 15 inches long. 3 thick webbed toes ending in clawed points. It looked like the bastard child of a man and a reptile. The impression clear as day. Can't be faked, one of the deputies muttered. Too deep, way too heavy. Next to the print, another deputy had marked something with an orange flag. It was a sliver of bone, curved, smooth, sharp, like a piece of a spine or a scale, but hard as ceramic. Dixon picked it up with tweezers and held it toward us. We ran a preliminary scan, he said. It's not from any known species. Doesn't match alligator or even marine life. Uncle Matt took a deep breath. It's from that thing." The sheriff nodded slowly. "And that's not all." He motioned for us to follow. We walked about 30 feet down the trail to a shaded part of the forest that ran parallel with the river. The underbrush had been trampled flat. Large, heavy footprints veered away from the water into the trees. "Looks like it came ashore," Dixon said, walked upright, followed the trail for a good 30 yards. Wes paled. "It left the river?" "Only for a while," the sheriff replied. "The trail leads back, but here's the part that doesn't sit right." He pointed toward the base of a nearby tree. Scratched into the bark were symbols. Not claw marks, symbols. Crude but deliberate. 3 overlapping triangles, a spiral, a line of dots descending in a curve. Nothing that made immediate sense. "What the hell is that?" I asked. "We don't know," Dixon admitted, "but it sure as hell wasn't made by accident." Uncle Matt stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "That ain't natural." "It looks like a warning," I said quietly. "Or a message. But from who?" That afternoon, the deputies gathered everything they could. Prints, blood samples, shredded containers, photos of the markings. We gave our final statements. But everyone moved slower now, cautiously. Even the cops were spooked. "We're sealing this area off for good," the sheriff told us before we left. "No more campers, no fishing. Hell, we're even moving the riverboat tours upstream." Wes didn't respond. He just kept staring out at the water, a beer clutched in his hand, the label peeling off in his fingers. "You think it's still down there?" he finally asked. The sheriff didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." "But what is it?" I asked. "Some mutated fish? Government experiment? What are we dealing with?" Sheriff Dixon turned to me slowly. "I don't think it's any of those things. I think it's older. Much older." "Like ancient?" Matt asked. Dixon nodded. "Maybe prehistoric. Maybe something even before that. There are stories. Legends from native tribes about river spirits that were half man, half creature. Guardians, monsters. Call them what you want." He looked back at the trail, his expression grim. "But whatever it is, it remembers. That night, we didn't drink. We didn't talk. We just sat in the living room, lights on, doors locked, guns within reach. I kept staring at the symbols I had snapped on my phone. I didn't understand them, but I felt them. They weren't just markings. They were a signature, a claim, territory. We left Mayersville the next morning. No goodbyes, no closure. Just 3 men with haunted eyes and a shared vow never to speak of it again. The Mississippi River faded into the distance behind us, cloaked in a thick layer of morning fog. It was strangely quiet, too quiet, as if the land itself had taken a breath and held it. Wes kept looking out the rear window, fingers twitching at his side like he was ready to draw a weapon that wasn't there. "I feel like it's watching," he whispered. "It is," I said. Uncle Matt didn't respond. He hadn't spoken since we started driving. I think something in him broke that night. Not physically, but spiritually. Some pillars of belief that had held him up were now crumbled and buried under the weight of what we'd seen. When we reached the highway, the tension lifted only slightly. Civilization returned. Billboards, gas stations, the scent of pavement and exhaust instead of mud and rot. But I could still hear it in the back of my mind. The hissing, the splash, the awful crunch of bones under those clawed feet. I left Mississippi 2 days later, returned to my apartment, my job, my girlfriend, my regular life. But I wasn't the same. The nightmares began immediately. I'd see it standing in the corner of my room, dripping wet, breathing in those labored, raspy gulps. Sometimes I'd dream I was underwater, sinking, and I'd feel its claws on my legs again, pulling, dragging. Other times, I'd wake up to the sound of hissing, only to find myself alone, drenched in sweat, the blankets tangled around my legs like a net. Wes and I drifted apart, not because we wanted to, but because we couldn't talk about it. Every conversation danced around the subject, like it was a mine in the middle of the room. Eventually, it was easier not to talk at all. Uncle Matt stayed in Mayersville. I don't know if he kept fishing, or if he even went outside anymore. Last I heard, he built a new fence around his property, 12 feet tall, steel reinforced, with motion sensor lights that covered the entire yard. Some nights, he still calls me, breathing heavy on the other end of the line, saying nothing until he finally whispers, "It came back." I never ask for details. I never want to know. 5 years passed, I got married, moved 3 states away, bought a house with my wife in a quiet neighborhood with no rivers nearby. I told myself it was over, that it was a one-time encounter, a freak of nature, a fluke, but deep down, I knew better. A few months ago, something happened. A story popped up online, buried under local news feeds, never picked up by national outlets. A fisherman found his boat capsized near the mouth of the river in a town 60 miles south of Mayersville. Authorities ruled it an accident, said he must have slipped, but photos leaked. Deep gashes in the hull, claw marks across the oars, and a phone recovered from the water, showing a single blurry image. Yellow eyes. That same hollow glow, that same recognition. It was enough to make me feel sick again. I tried not to think about it. I buried myself in work. I poured love into my wife and our quiet life. But I couldn't erase the fear that kept crawling back, like mold in the corners of my mind. Because here's what keeps me up at night. What if that thing wasn't the only one? What if that species has lived in the river for centuries? Unseen, undocumented, feeding quietly off stragglers and nighttime swimmers, dragging people under one by one? What if Mayersville isn't hiding a secret, but sitting on top of it? The symbols carved into the tree, they weren't random. They meant something. A message, a ritual, a pattern. I've stared at them for hours, drawn them on paper, compared them to old tribal markings, cave etchings, even religious texts. Nothing matches. But every time I look at them, I feel like they're looking back, watching, measuring, waiting. I still keep the AR-15, fully loaded, under the bed. My wife thinks I'm paranoid. She's never seen the photos. She doesn't know what happened that summer. And I'll never tell her, because some things don't need to be remembered. They remember you. Last week, I walked past the mirror in our bathroom after a late-night shower and caught a glimpse of something. A shadow, standing just outside the window. It was gone when I turned, but the mist on the glass, it was there, like someone or something had pressed its face against it. I haven't told anyone, not even Matt. I don't want to validate it, don't want to give it life by speaking its name. But I can feel it. The same presence, the same pressure in the air, like I'm still in that forest, like the Mississippi River never really let me go. So if you ever find yourself down south, some quiet town near the water, where the fog rolls in too thick and the locals get real quiet when you mention what lives beneath, listen, don't swim, don't walk the banks after dark, don't go camping by the river, and for the love of God, if you see yellow eyes glowing in the dark, run.